Welcome to the top 10 books of 2022 as listed by me, the BookTube Goddess, the #1 drag queen booktuber on YouTube. I met my goal of reading 50 books this year and, like last year, have put together this top 10 list. I'm not going to be doing a top 10 of the most disappointing books this year simply because I couldn't come up with 10 books I felt disappointed about, which meant this was a very good reading year for me. I did, however, read a lot of middle grade books, and if anyone would like to see a video of a top 10 list for middle grade books for 2022, let me know down in the comments, and while you're there, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Now, I read mainly speculative fiction, which is science fiction, fantasy, and horror, but surprise, there is one non-speculative novel on this list, also regarding series. If there's multiple books in a series that I've read, I'll only list either one book or the entire series. So, without further ado, here are my top 10 books for 2022. These are books that I personally read in 2022, not necessarily published in 2022. In fact, a couple of the books may be a little old. Coming in at number 10 is a book I don't think I talked about even in my live streams, or maybe I briefly mentioned it, but it's the Fleet of Worlds series by Larry Niven. I think at least one of the books in this series was co-written by Edward M. Lerner. The series was published between 2007 and 2012 and is part of Niven's known space universe, which notably includes Ringworld. In fact, it features my absolute favorite alien race we met in Ringworld, the Puppeteers. And the Puppeteers are the most cowardly race in the galaxy, yet one of the most technologically advanced races. They evolved from creatures that basically curl up in a protective ball to hide from predators, kind of like an ostrich hiding its head in the sand. And in fact, they kind of look like two-headed ostriches, except their brain pan is in their body, so they have huge brains. And the story focuses on their diaspora from the galaxy because they've determined that the galaxy will eventually die. And even though that won't happen for aeons, they are too freaked out, even by the thought of the galaxy dying, that they decide to run away as soon as they can, which means retrofitting entire worlds to become spaceships that fly away. Oh, and they also have human slaves on one of their worlds. We meet a few of our old Ringworld favorites, including human Louis Wu and the puppeteer, who is considered insane. Insane because he isn't a coward, Nessus. If you are a fan of Ringworld, and especially if you are a fan of the Puppeteers, this is a must-read series. Coming in at number 9 on my top 10 list is Station Eternity by Muir Lafferty, published in 2022. This is another science fiction book, only this time by an author I've never read before. It is also a mystery novel. Murders seem to always happen around the main character, Mallory Viridian, who also always is able to solve the murders. But the government is starting to get a little suspicious that so many people are being murdered around Mallory. And she has no idea why she is a magnet to murder. When aliens open up diplomatic contact with Earth, Mallory leaves to go to Station Eternity, which is sort of a United Nations of alien life. She does this in order not to be around other humans because that seems to attract them being murdered. Mallory convinces the aliens to take her to Station Eternity under some sort of asylum deal where they take her in and she lets them study her physiology. But twist! Unbeknownst to Mallory, a shuttle full of humans are on their way to Station Eternity. So the question arises, can Mallory escape her murder magnet? This is a super fun science fiction novel with some really interesting aliens, including a rock-like species who evolve in unexpected ways, and a hive mind of alien wasps. I will say that the first half of the novel reads differently, at least to me, than the last half, and frankly, I preferred the first half. But if you are interested in science fiction and mysteries and kick-ass aliens, look no further than Station Eternity. Coming in at number 8 is The Daughter of Dr. Moreau by Silvia Morena Garcia, published in 2022. This is a reimagining of H.G. Wells's The Island of Dr. Moreau, only focusing on Carlotta Moreau, Dr. Moreau's South American daughter, who helps him take care of the half-human, half-animal hybrids he creates. Unfortunately, these experiments are funded by Lizaldi, who hopes the hybrids will be cheap workers for his plantations. But when it looks like funding is about to be cut, Dr. Moreau tries to set Carlotta up with Lizaldi's son Eduardo. Anyway, this felt more of a character-driven story than plot-driven to me because I didn't think the plot was terribly surprising, at least in the way of plot twists, but I found myself really entranced by the characters, most of whom had shades of gray, especially Moreau's overseer, Montgomery Lawton. It does deal with racism and misogyny, so do your own due diligence as far as trigger warnings are concerned, but if you like moody, almost gothic novels with a South American twist, you can't go wrong with The Daughter of Dr. Moreau. Number 7 came as a complete surprise to me because it is not speculative fiction, but a cozy mystery recommended to me in my live streams. So thank you, Lynette and Lori and Cappuccino and everyone else who recommended The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie by Alan Bradley, published in 2009. This is the first novel in the Flavia de Luce mysteries, and there are about 10 books in the series. The last one was published in 2019. They are about an 11-year-old genius who lives with her 2 awful sisters in a decrepit mansion in the English countryside with her father, who still grieves for his dead wife. Now, the novel is told in first person from Flavia's POV. And this little girl is such an unexpected and delightful detective who is as creepy as she is intelligent. She is fascinated by death, doesn't seem to fear anything, and is a prodigy in chemistry, even having her own special laboratory. And of course, she is adept in all things poison. The voice of the novel really drives it. I was completely taken by her dry humor, and the writing is exceptional. If you like murder mysteries with unconventional detectives, you have to check out Flavia de Luce. Coming in at number 6 is The Wind-Up Girl by Paolo Bacigalupi, published in 2009. Another novel recommended to me in my live streams and strongly recommended by Fit to Be Read. The interesting thing about this novel is that the main character is completely unlikable, which normally can tank a novel. But in this case, he was very interesting because Anderson Lake is a terrible person, but he lives in a terrible world filled with even more terrible people. Set in the somewhat near future in Bangkok, Anderson works for Agrogen, a multinational company undercover as a factory manager, but having a much more nefarious purpose. The main conflict in this dystopian future is the lack of food brought about by mutations in the animal kingdom, so calories are king. The eponymous character in the novel, the wind-up girl, of course, is a Japanese-made artificial person named Amiko, who has been abandoned in Bangkok by her former owner and is horrifically abused psychologically, physically, sexually. So if those are triggers to you, stay away from this book. But strangely, she isn't even developed much as a character until later in the novel. So, if bioterrorism, dystopian futures, greedy corporations are your jam, be sure to pick up a copy of The Wind-Up Girl. Number 5 is the Final Architecture series by Adrian Tchaikovsky. The first book, Shards of Earth, was published in 2021, and the second book, Eyes of the Void, was published in 2022. The final book isn't out yet, but is set to be released in 2023, so something to look forward to. This was another Michael Everett's Fit to Be Read recommendation. He thought I may enjoy it because he knew how much I liked the Expanse series, and yes, I enjoyed this novel a lot. It is an epic space journey featuring a ragtag crew aboard the scavenger ship Vulture God. The story takes place after a war with mysterious Death Star type aliens called the Architects, who have destroyed the planet Earth, as well as colony planets of not only humans, but other aliens. The aliens in this series are fantastic, from sentient clams who are religious zealots to cyborg insects. This is true hard sci-fi with the stories centering around the mysteries of hyperspace. There are space battles and politics and characters you really grow to love. All science fiction fans need to check out The Final Architects, and I can't wait for the conclusion to be published next year. Number 4 is Nona the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, published in 2022. This is the third book in the Locked Tomb series. I believe the final book will be published in 2023. These books have been lovingly described as a story about lesbian necromancers in space. Now, I loved the first book, Gideon the Ninth, mostly because of the voice of Gideon. I was disappointed in the second book, Harrow the Ninth, because it didn't have Gideon's voice. Now that I'm used to each book in this series having a completely different voice, I fell in love with Nona the Ninth, who comes across as an extremely innocent, childlike girl. I think Muir is breaking ground in this genre mashup of science fiction and fantasy. The prose is so literary, the plots are so very complex, and especially because each novel in the series is told by such wildly divergent voices. If this sounds interesting to you, run out now and pick up the Locked Tomb series. Number 3 is The Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. The first book, Jade City, was published in 2018. The second book, Jade War, published in 2020. and the conclusion, Jade Legacy, was published in 2022. I read all three of these books back to back and was completely swept up in this family saga about the No Peak clan set in the small island nation of Kikon. Although this is a completely new fantasy world, there are many parallels to the Cold War, including the technology level, which is roughly late to middle 20th century. Think TVs, but no cell phones. Jade in this universe has magic powers, granting enhanced strength and speed and healing, things like that. Only one strain of humans, those that have evolved on Kikon among the Aboriginals and first settlers there, can safely handle the Jade. The story, in my opinion, is an amazing fantasy story. And I think it's a remarkable way to view the Cold War from a small nation perspective, even though it's fantasy and not historical fiction necessarily. I think you should run, don't walk, to your local bookstore and grab the Greenbone Saga. Number 2 is actually a surprise even to me because it is such a quiet, small novel. In fact, it is a novella. Yes, I am talking about A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers, published in 2022. It is the second novel in her Monk and Robot series. The first is A Song for the Wild Bill. Now, these books also explore maybe the newest subgenre of science fiction, solarpunk. Solarpunk imagines an optimistic future where environmental collapse is avoided through sustainable technologies. In fact, the Monk and Robot books are set in the world of Panga, which is a utopia where technology and nature exist in harmony. The main characters are, surprise, a monk and a robot. Sibling Dex is a non-binary T-monk who is searching for meaning in this utopian existence. Moscap is a robot, the first robot to contact humans after the robots went into hiding generations earlier. The stories are ultimately relationship stories about an intense platonic love affair, something which seems to be rarely explored in novels with some exceptions, like maybe the platonic love story between Fitz and the Fool in Robin Hobb's Elderlings universe. But the Monk and Robot books are small, philosophical musings. They're quiet stories which, yes, move even this hard old heart. If that sounds like something that appeals to you, please check them out. If you have been watching my channel, it will come as no surprise to you that my #1 read of 2022 is Babel, or The Necessity of Violence and Arcane History of the Oxford Translators Revolution by R.F. Kuang, published in 2022. R.F. Kuang is, of course, the author of The Poppy Wars, but rather than sticking to epic fantasy, she has turned to historical fantasy, reimagining the Opium Wars during Great Britain's colonial era as seen through the eyes of a Chinese-born, half-English young boy named Robin, who is taken to England by the mysterious Professor Lovell, where he is trained to be a student at Oxford, where he finds a friend group of other marginalized students. The magical element comes from the magic system, which uses silver and language. And I believe it is a metaphor for cultural appropriation because Britain empowers itself through cannibalizing other cultures' languages. But it isn't a far leap to maybe extend that to other areas. But anyway, I think this is a masterpiece, a book that will be a landmark in fantasy literature. Of course, your mileage may vary, but I think you should at least give Babbel a shot. So those are my top 10 reads for 2022. What was your top read this year? Let me know down in the comments. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.